So, time to take a look at the Sunday papers. Here with me to review them are the journalist and author Janella Aldred and the presenter and writer Matthew Stadlen. Here with me in the studio. Quite excited about this, to have both of you here. It's lovely to see you. Thanks for getting up so early on a Sunday. We appreciate it. So, a couple of stories around Man City's win on a lot of the front pages, as well as politics. But so let's do the football first, shall we? And Janella, you've picked out the Mail on Sundays, a picture of a very happy couple there on the front.
Yeah, and I mean, they've done a whole 12-page spread in the Mail on this, and they run an amazing run. I think the interesting thing about the run that's happened is they almost seem to kind of run out of puff towards the end of the season, but it doesn't matter. As an Arsenal fan, I'm not bitter at all about this treble. However, no, it's a great thing, and I think it's great to have an English team winning the Champions League, and so congratulations to Man City and Jack Grealish looking amazing, although once you actually get into the paper, not so glowing about him actually, but a really nice headline and a great picture.
Is that right? He's put on Instagram fantastic celebrations from inside the changing room. It did look like a lot of fun after the match, and this is on the front of a lot of the pages. I think the papers came in quite late as well, because obviously they're waiting for the result. The Observer there also has goal celebrations on its front page.
Yeah, that's Rodri, and he plays for Spain. He's played about 40 times for Spain. Very good player. I think he's played more times in a Premier League season for Pep Guardiola's Man City than any other Pep Guardiola player in the Premier League in his time there. You said it was an English team, and it's...
Well, true.
Okay. I have no problem with the players not being English, although there were 4 English players in the team, but it's the fact that it is basically, it was bought as a club by money from the United Arab Emirates, which I have a slight problem with, just because of the human rights issue. You can't really speak as an Arsenal fan because your stadium is called the Emirates. What I would say...
I feel like you're trolling. I wasn't saying anything.
But as a United, I'm a Manchester United fan, and I remember where I was in 1999 when we won the treble. I was in Peru on my year off, and I leapt out of the bar because we scored 2 last-minute goals, and I jumped across the street, almost getting run over, and that felt a bit different. That felt very special. City fans will tell you this is incredibly special, but it raises wider issues. If you go on social media, it does raise wider issues of English football being bought up by foreign money, and not just foreign money, but oil money. And as a United fan, again, I'm very concerned that Qatar money could buy my club, and then I've got a big moral dilemma. Do I continue to support the club I've supported for 30 years?
Well, I think on a morning like today, as much as what you're saying is not entirely wrong, great for Man City, great celebration. They are based in England, so they are an English team, and I think, you know, it's great for football. And yes, it raises lots of money. Questions about Saudi money. I'm a big into golf, so this week all the golf stuff. However, today I think is Man City, and they deserve to take a bow. They've been an incredible run this season.
And you watch the pleasure on the faces of those players and their families, and it does look as special for them as it's always been for any team. And as an Englishman, I feel proud that we've won the Champions League again on some level. Got Pep Guardiola, one of the greatest, if not the greatest manager of all time. So there is something to celebrate.
Yeah, and I think the celebrations are probably carrying on.
Oh, yes.
Right now, because to achieve the treble is something they've wanted to do for a very long time, isn't it?
One final very quick thought, Jack Grealish, who's got a very strong Brummie accent we were talking about earlier, and you come from the Midlands yourself. I mean, you listen to the interview on BT Sport afterwards that he gave, and he does seem like a really genuine guy. As far as you can tell on television, it's all about him. It was about the people who drove him to football training throughout his life. It was about his parents. There's a very human side to that story. Even though he cost £100 million,
not quite relatable.
He's still a young bloke, and he still came up the hard way, and you've got to doff your cap to him, I think.
Yeah, and all the people that supported him, as you say, family are all around him. Let's move on to the other big issue that has dominated this weekend, and that is Boris Johnson's resignation and the fallout from that. Labour clearly trying to capitalise. Here's Keir Starmer telling the Sunday Mirror there should be a general election. He's saying that Rishi Sunak has lost control.
Yeah, and I am interested in his position, because if I was Keir Starmer, I would not be calling for a snap election right now. I don't think, you know, as someone who's looking in, has he made a case that if he went to the general public now, we would say, yes, you are a group of sensible individuals, we'd want to run our country. And it's debatable whether we have a group of sensible individuals now running our country. However, he's written a letter in the Mirror. He's calling for a general election. I mean, I think you know, Rishi Sunak is in a difficult position, yes, in terms of Boris Johnson resigning and the 3 by-elections. Do I think a general election right now is the answer? I'm not entirely sure if I was Keir Starmer that I would be calling for that at this time.
I think it's quite sensible politics, actually, because firstly, if you are the leader of the opposition, it is your job to try and oust the government. The Tories are currently yet again in a state of chaos, with sort of civil war potentially breaking out between the Johnson faction and the Sunak faction. And also, I think back to 2007, when Gordon Brown took over in a sort of coronation from Tony Blair, and he bottled it. Yeah. He didn't go to the people because George Osborne very cleverly made a move on inheritance tax. And I don't think the electorate ever forgave him for that or forgot it. Because if you, as the leader of the opposition, are running scared of a general election, it's a really bad look. So actually, although we're not going to have a snap general election, I think it's quite good optics by Starmer.
Yeah, because it makes him look confident. I think if I was Rishi Sunak on the other side, I would probably say, OK, I'll call your bluff. Let's go for it. But he's not going to do that. So that is not going to happen. But if I was him, that's what I would call his bluff. Because you're right, when Gordon Brown bottled it, when David Cameron said, you know, you should call election, he said, no, all of a sudden you think, OK, you don't think you can win. So yeah, optics-wise, it's great. If it was to happen, I think that would be even more interesting.
And as far as the papers are concerned, it seems to be, depending on the paper's sympathies, there's a different take on how much support there is for Boris Johnson and how much support there is for Rishi Sunak. And that infighting kind of played out in the papers, isn't it? You've picked up the Telegraph next, Matthew. Their headline is Johnson orchestrates attack on PM over swindle. What's the swindle?
Well, the swindle is this suggestion which Sunak's team, number 10, have poured cold water on, that somehow Sunak vetted and changed the honours list that Boris Johnson submitted. So that's been completely denied by number 10, as I understand it. Interestingly, the front page of the Sunday Times, they've poured cold water on the concept of a sort of Johnsonian faction rebellion. The Sunday Telegraph, if you look at its headline, Johnson orchestrates attack on PM over swindle, suggests that that's sort of still live. I'm quite sceptical. I think these are really the death throes of Boris Johnson. I mean, he wrote that 1,000-word statement, resignation statement, on Friday. It was an absolutely extraordinary document. He does leave open the door for a return. He says he's leaving Parliament for now, so we can't rule it out entirely, but I think it is very, very unlikely. And the fact that a couple of other MPs, the latest just yesterday, have sort of stepped down with him, I just think we talked about optics. I don't think it's anything like enough to threaten Sunak.
Yes, it's Nadine Dorries and Nigel Adams have stood down alongside Boris Johnson. So Rishi Sunak does face 3 by-elections. And the Sunday People's front page is Boris, I'll be back. And he did leave the door open, as you say, in his resignation
statement. He reminds me of one of those X Factor contestants who says, this is not the last you've seen of me. I think it could be this time. It might just be that it is the last we see of him. But I think what he is doing is definitely a play for Boris, and I don't think it's a play for the British public's best interest. And I think in the end, we're at a point with our politics, with the economy, with everything, where I think people really want to see what's in it for us, you know, the general voting public. And I think this play is nothing to do with what's in the best interest of us or the Tory party. It's a personal play, and I think people see that.
Why it's damaging in the short term to Sunak, and this may become old news quite quickly, as I've suggested, but why it's damaging right now and why Sunak certainly won't go to the electorate now is because it disrupts this aura of relative calm that he's established since the catastrophic premiership of Liz Truss. He wants to be seen as sort of Mr. Competent, as he tried to be during the pandemic. So for civil war, or the spectre of civil war, to loom over the party again damages that image.
And obviously Keir Starmer enjoying the return of the psychodrama, I guess. So we'll see how long it plays out and whether there are any more resignations. Very briefly, front page of the Sunday Times has a photograph of a poor guardsman overcome by the heat. I mean, not the only one either, I don't think.
No.
Passed out.
Literally
in a passing out.
Yeah, I know. That pun just kind of begs to be used. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it was warm yesterday. I mean, I was out 8 o'clock. New golfer, playing golf, 12 o'clock, I was baking and like really sweating. He's got this massive furry animal basically on his head and all that they're doing. But for the trooping next week, the weather is meant to be slightly cooler, so hopefully there won't be a repeat of this next week when it's actually all about to...
The video of it is pretty shocking. I don't know whether you've shown the
I
video.
think we've got it there. And he's carrying on playing.
What struck us was they carried on playing and that they didn't sort of help him. I don't know what protocol suggests that's a good idea.
They've run out with a little stretcher to pick him up, but I think the damage has already been done.
Janelle and Matthew, we're out of time. Thanks both very much indeed.